I propose to conduct an interview, an exchange with you. You can also ask me some questions if you want. You are free to do so. But let's start with your presentation. Who you are, and tell me a little bit about your background, please.
Sure. So I worked in the U.S. intelligence community for approximately 20 years. I served in Congress much of that time working with the Senate Intelligence Committee. I went to the Pentagon in 1997 and served under President Clinton and Secretary of Defense Bill Cohen.
Okay.
Then, strangely, I was kept on by the next administration and served under President George Bush and under Secretary Rumsfeld. After that, I went back to Capitol Hill to become the Minority Staff Director of the Senate Intelligence Committee. I became involved in this issue, however, much later. When I served in the government, this was really a non-issue. It came up a couple of times, but we never talked about it. We didn't have any programs or anything like that. And someone introduced me. I was doing some classified consulting work for the Office of Naval Intelligence, unpaid, just trying to keep my hand in the game. And I became aware that restricted military airspace was being violated routinely by unidentified aircraft. And they were hanging around in these training areas where we're doing workups, and you know, we don't know if they're Russian or Chinese, they're spying, what are they doing? And nobody was doing anything about it. Nobody was reporting it. The Secretary of Defense didn't know, the Congress didn't know, policymakers didn't know. Nobody wanted to talk about it or touch it because of the stigma. It was like heresy, and that just struck me as completely unacceptable. So I tried to get to the Secretary of Defense. I knew two people who were very direct reports to him, and I introduced Lil Elizondo to them, and we brought in Navy pilots to speak to these people. They still didn't want to touch it, even after recognizing it was really going on. It was too politically sensitive. They were afraid that even if the Secretary of Defense just got a briefing, that might hurt his reputation, even if he just listened and had a meeting on the topic. So eventually it became a choice of do nothing and let this continue.
Okay.
And I'm thinking about Pearl Harbor, I'm thinking about 9/11, where intelligence agencies weren't sharing information, and we had that disaster with the trade towers and the Pentagon. I was in the Pentagon when the plane hit, so it was very real to me. These intelligence failures are not acceptable. So faced with that choice, I decided to go to the press and to Congress, and fortunately someone supplied me with some videotapes that were authenticated and helped me make a deal with the New York Times and then also get the attention of Congress.
Okay, fine, thank you. Today we are there to talk about the CIPO. The CIPO is also an organization with many members, and they propose some question for you, and a word about the CIPO. So it's today 15 association with study groups and specialists about media outlets and also independent searcher. It's a citizen collective with the aim of promoting a serious, scientific and transparent understanding of studies related to the UFO phenomenon, known or UAP. A word about me. I work at the CIPO for 16 years. There I have a pivotal role in creating the state-of-art governmental French UAP database, developing also automated investigation software, and I contribute on the sideline of the CIPO to various projects of research. For example, I co-author a study, I think you know it, on spatial correlation between UAP and the French nuclear activity. And also I work on study with meteorite interaction with stratospheric aerosol. Well, in the beginning of this year, I found an organization, UAP Check, with the aim also to outreach the politics, the scientists, and the public. And I am, of course, a member of the CIPO. So, I will ask you some questions from some member of our organization. Let's start with the thematic of the government and involvement of the US government with international organization or international cooperation. For example, can you provide some insight into the evolution of UAP investigation and reporting within the US government during your time as the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Intelligence?
So, at the time that I served in the government, there was no UAP activity or discussion at all. There were air defense issues, and of course there were air defense reporting issues, and if something was unknown, that would get into the system, but there was no UAP program or policy that anyone ever mentioned or that I ever came across.
Okay. And as a staff director of the United States Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, what role did you play in overseeing intelligence activities? And were UAP investigation ever a topic of interest or concern for the committee?
So interesting. So the committee reviews the budget of all the intelligence agencies, the defense intelligence agencies, DIA, NRO, the National Security Agency, the National Reconnaissance Office, that's NRO, as well as CIA. So our job is largely to review those budgets to ensure that they're appropriate, the government's not doing anything illegal or inappropriate, and that the spending is justified and so forth. So that's the principal role, policymaking and budget of the committee. And the committee also reviews sensitive programs and activities, covert actions, things like that. So my job was to advise the vice chairman in that case, and to help organize the staff and so forth to make sure the work was getting done. The UFO issue was never officially raised at any committee hearing that I can recall. It came up a couple of times. I saw one intelligence community publication that was classified that had to do with trying to explain some sightings that some pilots had had. On another occasion, a friend of mine was visiting a surveillance facility. It was an optical ground-based surveillance facility, and I asked him, I said, while you're out there, I didn't want to say UFO. I said, why don't you just ask them if they see anything unusual? And he asked them, and sure enough they had. And they had a videotape of 5 objects burning through the atmosphere, horizontal to the surface of the Earth, strange and unexplained. And they sent that to the committee, and I showed it to a couple of senators and showed it to some of the other staff members. But there was nobody in the government who seemed to care about the issue or wanted to do anything about it at that time. So it wasn't until much later, after I left the government, that I really got deeply involved in this topic.
Okay. And so today, could you elaborate on any international cooperation or engagement related to UAP phenomena, on how the US collaborate with other countries on this topic?
Well, the US is just itself getting organized on this topic and getting off the ground. So as recently as 2017, there was no reporting mechanism for pilots. Pilots were afraid to discuss it. If they saw a UAP anyway, they wouldn't report it. It's only the last few years the US government itself has started to collect information and research. Now the Japanese government is starting to collect information on this topic, and there are channels between the US and its allies to share information on a variety of topics. There are multiple channels, depending on the issue. So there's probably some discussions in some of those channels. The government does intend, I understand, to reach out more to other countries and try to be a bit more collaborative. But I don't think there's much going on there yet, because most other countries are not as actively collecting information, and they may not be experiencing the same issue that we have. We're having a lot of incidents and a lot of reports, and other countries may not be experiencing that, or they may be experiencing it but not detecting it, or maybe people aren't reporting it because they're afraid of it. But in our country, it's now to the point where there's a UFO report every day. From the military. It's just the military.
Right.
So we're talking hundreds of reports every year. So it's sometimes it's Navy ships underway at sea that are being tracked and followed by little things that might be drones or something else, we're not sure. Sometimes it's objects entering restricted training areas. Sometimes it leads to canceling Air Force exercises because of concern about mid-air collisions and concern about security. So for us, it's become a pretty significant issue.
Yeah. Maybe it will change with the involvement of the NASA, which is more open to the public. Because at the Japan we collect currently about 200 cases by year. So it's important for only the French area. And so another question, more personally, can you share any memorable instance or cases related to UAP phenomena encountered during your life, which left a lasting impression or posed unique challenge for, you think, the national security?
I've never seen a UFO.
Okay.
So, but what has formed my impression, one of the strongest things, is talking to our pilots and radar operators. And I've interviewed many of them. And when you sit with them face to face, these are not people that want to talk about this generally, but they've had an encounter of some kind. And their experiences in some cases are very compelling and independently corroborated by other sensors. So those discussions have made a very deep impression on me.
Okay. Now, a question about the US president on political candidates. President Biden hasn't shown, apparently, a lot of interest in the UAP topics, at least publicly. But in some way, some say he couldn't be a disclosure president. Next year, there is a new election with potentially a new American president. Do you view it as an opportunity for disclosure? And have you or will you brief the other candidates to ensure they are informed about the subject?
Well, I don't think it's going to be a big election issue in the United States. I think the big issues are going to be the pocketbook issues and cultural issues and that kind of thing. I don't think this, and also, by the way, the parties are in agreement on this. This is one of the only topics in which the Republicans and Democrats agree, so it's not contentious, and I don't think it's going to be debated. I'm also very skeptical about the idea that any president is going to want to disclose this. Imagine if you're the President of the United States. Your number one job is to help keep the country safe and make people feel safe. And who wants to hold a press conference and say, aliens are visiting, but we don't know where they're from, we don't know why they're here, and we can't protect you. Have a nice day. I mean, who wants to give a press conference like that? So I think any chief executive, I think there's a case that can be made, and I believe myself they should, if they have that information, I think it should be released, but I can also understand why many politicians would not want to do that. And I think that is going to continue to be a tough sell to get a president. You know, if we really do have this absolute confirmation and proof, I think it's going to be difficult to convince any politician in the White House, any president, to reveal that information unless there's some very, very compelling reason. I hope that changes. I would like to see that change. I think it could be extremely beneficial. And I think the world right now is in a dangerous and increasingly dangerous place. And I think this is one thing that could really shock people, shock the leaders of the world, and force people to reassess and hopefully promote more collaboration and cooperation between countries if they realize there's a third party out there and we're being observed.
Maybe.
And so it would promote science, it would promote research, we might make great advances that we wouldn't otherwise make. We could bring the world-class scientists in to study the material. And in the meantime, the final thing I will say is that in order to survive as a species, we have to collaborate. No one country can solve global warming or artificial intelligence or the spread of nuclear weapons or advances in biotechnology. All these things require international collaboration that has never been seen before, it has never been accomplished. So I think there's a case that could be made. I don't see anyone making that case right now, and I don't think it's likely to happen, but I wish it would happen.
Okay, it's clear. The intelligence establishment seems to have played a huge part in the obfuscation of UAP. RFK Jr. seems like the kind of candidate who would be willing to go after this establishment, considering his personal history. Do you think he will be a valuable asset in the disclosure efforts?
I don't know him personally. I don't know him well. I've known many senators over the years and politicians. From what I do know, he sounds like somebody that might have that inclination, and he would bring a fresh perspective and a different perspective. But it's different when you're campaigning and when you're actually responsible and when you're actually in office. So I think it's very difficult to say. I mean, if you can't assure people that it's not a threat, do you want to terrify all these children and all these, people that are going to potentially be very fearful? I think we need to help educate the public that we're not seeing any hostility. This has been going on for a long time. But when the public doesn't know those kinds of things, which they generally don't yet, they're more likely to react negatively and be very concerned. I was surprised when I found out my own wife doesn't like this issue. She thinks it's creepy. She doesn't want to hear about it. And I realized that I'm very much in the minority. To me, it's exciting, fascinating, but I think I'm very much in the minority. I think most people are very uncomfortable with the topic.
Still today. And you think there is an evolution on that or not?
I do. I think that younger people are more open to this. I think they're more excited about it, more interested in it. I don't think they view it as much of a threat or a concern. I don't think they're as fearful. And I think as people learn more about it and get more information, I think generally they become less fearful.
Okay. One question about the euro. Director Kirkpatrick has been accused of doing a poor job and rumored to be leaving soon. Do you think former CIPO director Lou Elizondo will be a suitable replacement, and would he be willing to take on the role?
I know Lou very well. We've worked closely together for years. He's got a tremendous amount of energy, and he knows the system. I think he would be very open with Congress. I think he could build trust there. But I doubt that this administration or others would look to those of us who've been on the outside agitating. They tend to promote from within. And so I don't think it's likely, but I think Lou would do a great job if he was selected.
Okay. Concerning Louis Elizondo, precisely, he has made quite astonishing claims, including that he and the US government knew who the non-human entities visiting us are, their origin, technologies, and the purpose of their presence on Earth. Can you confirm this? And if so, where is the official proof of his allegation?
Well, I've not heard Lou say that he knows that we're being visited by non-human intelligence. Perhaps he has. I haven't seen that quote. And I certainly can't speak for Lou. Okay. But I do believe that there's a serious possibility that some of these craft are non-human, are manifestations of non-human intelligence. It seems to be the only viable explanation in some cases, such as the Nimitz case. Moreover, I don't think we should be surprised to encounter intelligent machines. Given the age of the galaxy and the age of the universe and the trajectory of technology, we're already seeing AI explode. And we have unmanned vehicles, and it's obvious, you know, we have a vehicle that's left the solar system already, the Voyager spacecraft. It's obvious we're going to be sending more and more probes out. Theoretical physicists are already identifying ways perhaps to reach very high velocities that would make space travel more feasible. So I think it's a perfectly legitimate hypothesis, and in fact that's what I'm here to talk about.
Okay. Is it possible for you to get involved in official communication efforts directed towards the French or European governments? And if so, how?
I'm a private citizen, so I can voluntarily work with other organizations, scientific organizations, but I can't act in any official capacity for the United States. So, you know, I'm already supporting the Galileo project in the United States. I'm involved with the Scientific Coalition for Ufology. I'm trying to promote scientific research wherever I can and help raise awareness about this issue. But I'm not in a position to do anything formal other than, you know, maybe I could make some introductions sometime. But in terms of bridging gaps between the U.S. and other countries, I'm really not in a position to do anything official.
You think so? Because you have a very good image regarding our position as French. We think you are doing a very good job on this subject, and your communication is great, and we need to have some people like you there also in Europe, and you can probably spread good idea also on a good information of how we can maybe help with the subject for the politics. I'm sure you will be helped.
Well, that's very kind of you. I will say the UFO community, in my country at least, talks to itself a lot and doesn't do enough outreach to the mainstream, to academia, to the press, to the public, general public. And so that's what I look to do when I can. If I'm offered an opportunity to do an interview that helps reach the general public, or give a speech that helps reach the general public, I try to do that because I think it's very important for a number of reasons.
Okay. About testimonies concerning UAP, what is the follow-up regarding David Grush's testimony? And has the interest waned?
I'm not sure what I'm allowed to say about that, but there are certainly, that is proceeding. There are continuing discussions going on. I expect Dave will have a chance to talk directly with congressmen in the not too distant future, and what they'll be able to say about that after they talk to him, I don't know. I don't know quite what limitations may be placed on him. In our system of government, some programs can only be shared with members of certain committees, or sometimes only with the chairman and vice chairman of certain committees, and a very limited number of members of Congress. So some of the people in the House, for example, who are most vocal and most interested are not on those committees or in those positions, and so they have to sort some things out regarding that conversation. I don't know exactly where they're coming out on that and what Dave will be free to say, and then what the congressman will be able to say after they meet with him.
Okay. What are your thoughts on the Schumer amendment? Is it a diversion or a dead end like JFK regulation? A good idea but destined to fail because it will never pass? Or the golden path of a disclosure?
We're talking about the Schumer bill?
Yeah.
I think it will likely pass. I think it should pass. It has support in the Senate. It's already in conference with the House, so it's been passed by the entire U.S. Senate. Okay. And the question is whether it will, I think the more likely prospect is the language may change some in conversation with the House. In particular, there's some concern, I think it's really an unnecessary concern about the eminent domain provision. There's a provision that says if anybody has materials from off-world materials, technology, it belongs to the U.S. government. So if you're a corporation and you have this stuff, you have to give it back to the government. I don't see how any private corporation could have that material to begin with, so I don't see it as a really significant, I think it's, if they have it, it doesn't belong to them. It can only belong to the American government cannot selectively give something to one company that it doesn't give to other companies or offer a competitive process. That's illegal. That's why our government doesn't engage in economic espionage, because if we stole a trade secret, who would we give it to? We don't even know what corporations are American corporations. We can't just play favorites and give it to, one U.S. company. So I'm skeptical. That provision might have trouble, but I'm not sure it's a very significant provision. I think the Presidential Commission has a good chance of passage.
Okay. And do you think the Schumer amendment be truly effective without coercive measure?
It would be a challenge. I think partly will depend who they put on that commission. If they put knowledgeable people who understand how the government works and where to look, and really understand the history of what stones to look under, I think they have a reasonable chance. But remember, their recommendations go to the president. They don't unilaterally decide. So they could recommend that a bunch of information be declassified, that these organizations don't want declassified, and then those organizations will be talking to the president saying, don't declassify it. The commission might be saying the other thing, and the president will be caught in the middle, have to make a decision. In any event, that process will take time.
Okay. What is your opinion on the ICIG response letter signed by Thomas Monahan on September?
Yeah, it's a little disappointing to me. They're in an awkward spot politically. I understand that, but I think I've met with them myself, and I believe they have more pertinent information, and I hope that they'll make it available to the appropriate committees.
I completely agree with that. What was the DoD benefit in accepting the SCIF?
For Dave Grush to testify? In allowing it to proceed?
Yeah.
Well, they're under pressure from Congress.
Okay.
And Congress holds the purse strings. And Congress can make a lot of fuss with the press and so forth. So I think if you're asking about why did they allow the congressman to go into the SCIF to read the IG documents, I think it was because Congress has a right. And they can only hold back for so long. I don't think they have an argument that they can really make that these congressmen don't have a right to read this material.
But can they found an advantage doing so, allowing the SCIF? For example, the people who engage or participate to this SCIF now are in the secret, maybe.
Yeah,
they cannot speak.
Right.
More,
Right. I was surprised. A few of them did make public comments when they came out.
Yeah.
And that kind of thing is tricky because if people go into the skiffs and they come out and reveal it, then the executive branch doesn't trust them and doesn't want to share more information.
Exactly.
So it depends what the ground rules are and what information is classified and what isn't. But there is always concern in the executive branch about leaks from Congress. And so that's one reason the intelligence committees were established, and that's one of the problems here, is that the regular committees that do oversight, like the intelligence committee is a skiff. The whole committee is a skiff. This committee space and the hearing room is a skiff. And everything there is very secure, and they have processes and procedures for handling all of that. The people understand how secrecy works. None of the staff are allowed to talk to the press except for the staff directors, and then only in certain circumstances. And so the executive branch is more comfortable working with the oversight committees. This has now gotten out of that to the House Oversight Committee, which is not the Intelligence Committee, the Armed Services Committee. That sometimes makes the other committees uncomfortable, and it makes the executive branch uncomfortable. So that's one of the complicating factors.
Connected to this, given that many people have been working in secrecy for decades on military application, inspired by UAP observation and contact, what are the chances of concrete evidence being made public that doesn't jeopardize the intelligence community and that everyone agrees on the reality of the recent disclosure? Should we assume, given the history of revelation over the past 40 years, that a long battle for gradual disclosure is in order, which could discourage many insiders who are afraid to speak out, including outside the USA?
So, as I said earlier, I'm not expecting the government to reveal what it has, if it has these materials. I expect them to continue to forcefully deny that they have any evidence of extraterrestrial life. That, I think, is going to continue. I think, however, that concrete evidence could be obtained by the Galileo Project or other governments, scientists, as they begin to collect sensor data independently. I also think it's possible that we could have a UAP incident that really breaks things open. For example, what happened in 1952 in the United States on 2 consecutive weekends, UFOs were flying over the Capitol, we were launching fighter jets, it was front page news, there was a huge press conference, the biggest press conference since World War II. Imagine if that happened next year. And everyone's got smartphones, and we've got much better radars and all of that. That would be tremendously sensational. And that's one of the reasons I think it's important for people, to have these discussions and to help sort of inoculate the public a little bit to these kinds of possibilities, because whatever this is, we don't control it.
We have had a huge wave in 2014 in France of flight over nuclear facilities with not 100 of observation, but almost in all over the space in French area. And then we have had a political problem with that, because it was, of course, a question of defense, but you have Greenpeace, which were also question about his activity, but Greenpeace denied of doing anything in this case. And we are there with this problem when it concerns the public in a way, because you have many observations at this time which were public, and many observations which were also in the military area. And so it was complicated to for the French government to disclose the information they have, but we know they have information because it was everywhere in the newspaper. And it's a very good example for me, a case we have to work on, because if tomorrow, like you said, we have again a new wave of observation, it will start again, but with the camera, the phone, etc. And I think we do not have the good process today to somewhere give the information to the right person, the person who need to have this information, for example, in this case, the scientist, because it's not strictly a problem for the security, it's also a problem for the science. And we will see. I will be very interested if you have tomorrow a wave of observation in the USA.
Well, I don't know, two or three things I would say. One, we've had many sightings around nuclear facilities from World War II on, and around ICBM sites and intrusions over some of our most sensitive airspace. Many sightings. I'll be talking a little bit about that tomorrow. This continues. We're having these same issues around nuclear facilities, around military bases. We had an issue, I think it was last year in the springtime, could have been the year before out west, where for several months, farmers and ranchers were reporting all these sightings, and the government got involved. They never found out where these things were coming from. We never got to the bottom of it, but it's becoming more problematic and more commonplace. And in that case, I talked to a sheriff out there who responded to one of these calls, and he had a very interesting story. He said he saw a larger object come in, and the smaller objects went inside it. And then it shot off at incredible speed. Now that's just hearsay, you can't really do anything with that, but it's concerning. We're having these things following Navy ships at sea. We're having them going over our air base in Guam and shining lights down into the most sensitive part of the base. And one of the things that's unusual is that these things are bright, they're lit up. And you would think, say, if it was Chinese reconnaissance, that they wouldn't have the lights on, right? At night. They wouldn't want to be seen. They'd be clandestine. So it's mysterious and it's concerning.
I have a question. Yes, there. In 2018 or 16, you have said during an interview with Leslie King that you have been on the area
51, yeah.
But you said also that there is no cover-up.
Let me be clear about this.
Yeah.
I did not see anything out there that had to do with UFOs. And I had broad access to the different programs that were going on around that area, and there was nothing I was aware of with UFOs. I was also not out there to search the place. I wasn't out there looking for, in tunnels or looking for this so-called S4 location, and I wasn't conducting an investigation. I was out there, on business and looking at certain programs. So I don't have a definitive read, but I certainly did not see anything UFO related there.
Okay, I see.
Although I will tell you something, it's interesting because I asked one of the guys there, who was one of the people working on one of these programs out in the desert. I said, "Have you ever seen any UFOs because of this reputation?" He said, "Yes." He said, "We have seen them at night." So that was the only UFO thing that came up when I was out there.
I see. Question about your position concerning the UAP hypothesis. UAP come in variety of shapes, orbs, triangles, cigars, etc. And what is your favorite hypothesis to explain this diversity of shapes?
Well, our government has said, and I agree with them, that this is not one phenomenon. There are probably multiple things going on. It may be probably different groups with different origin. In some cases, they may be drones from another country, maybe adversaries. In other cases, whatever it is, the technology seems to be distinct. So we have these triangles, and there's a very strong pattern of people reporting these triangles all the way back into the 50s. And long before stealth. Stealth accounts for some of the sightings. It certainly doesn't account for all of them. And they're different than discs. But, you know, we just don't know. This is one of the many, many questions that we don't know the answer to. Sometimes people see these shapes transform.
Of course.
And so it's conceivable that maybe it's one technology from one group and they've got the ability to change shapes. There's so much that we don't know and we need to find out. And that's part of what makes this field so exciting.
One last question about what? What is your position about the possibility of existing contact with non-human intelligence and abduction?
I have not investigated the abduction phenomenon. There are, you know, I've come out of the Defense Department and the intelligence community, and I've been looking at those cases, talking to pilots and so forth. I know one person in the government who had an abduction kind of experience. They believe they were abducted. I know about some of the famous cases that are well documented. The Travis Walton case. I've met Travis Walton and spoken with him, and nobody has an explanation for that case. There were a lot of witnesses to that case who saw the UFO, saw him hit by this beam. He disappeared for days. Nobody's accounted for that missing time. So it's a credible story, but it's not something that I've really researched and have a strong opinion about. I'm a data guy. I mean, I believe in facts and data, and I think we should fearlessly and with integrity follow the data wherever it leads. If that turns out to be happening, okay, so be it. But I don't have a strong view on that. I do think there's a lot of people that are not really being abducted who are having other kinds of experiences and reporting it as abductions. You know, in my country, there's something like 3 million people that think they're being abducted, and that's I can't really believe that it's happening on that scale. So I think it's probably a mix of things, but some of them could be, and we have some well-documented cases like the Betty and Barney Hill case and the Travis Walton case. So I certainly think that's a possibility.
Okay, thank you. You have a question? Okay. The UAP phenomenon involves necessarily the industry. Materials, energy, etc. Our president, French president, met with Elon Musk recently. Okay. We will be glad to encounter our president to speak with him about UAP.
Would I agree to that?
Yes.
Well, of course I'd be honored, of course.
Okay, thank you. And a last question, do you have a message you would like to give to the citizen organization? How they could help on the subject?
Yes, I think continue the research, support science, and continue to engage in dialogue with other people. I think our progress is going to be dependent to some degree on our ability to build bridges to the mainstream, to help convince, you know, many people just dismiss this out of hand. Oh, it can't be true. And they've never looked at the data. And so I think if we can help expose people to the data when the opportunity arises, gently, you know, respectfully, we can start to open a lot of minds, a lot of closed minds on this subject. And that's why I'm here, to try to help people consider this possibility and expose them to some of the evidence that I've encountered so they can draw their own conclusions. And I think if we can get more discussion in the press, for example, and as science proceeds, that will provide more evidence and more data that'll be helpful. And hopefully we can mitigate some of the sort of immediate rejection and unwillingness to consider this issue.